The most important part to non-duality is that nobody's going to awaken. There's not anyone that's going to awaken, because there is no body. I know that makes no sense in the intellect. Like, of course there's bodies here, how can nobody awaken? But as this subject goes apparently deeper and deeper, it's seen that there was never anybody that was going deeper into. There was a false self that was claiming to be an entity and claiming to have an experience. And as that begins to be seen through, it's seen that there is nothing there. There is nothing experiencing everything. And it's a total mystery. It's totally beyond concept. This is boundlessness experiencing itself as form. Eternity experiencing itself as finite. So you come here and you listen to my talks and you believe that you're going to get something, that you're going to get presence, that you're going to get freedom, that you're going to awaken. But then maybe what begins to happen is it begins to be seen that there is no one to awaken. The you that you thought yourself to be is an appearance, but not an actuality. And it appears to something much bigger, endless, beyond words, non-definable. And that's who you truly are. This infinite space experiencing itself. And in that infinite space appears a character called Lisa or David or Harold or Nancy or Carol. But that character isn't an experiencer. It is an experience. It's something that's being experienced. So everything you think, everything you feel, everything you know, all your life experiences, all of that is being experienced. Notice the emotion comes up and it's being experienced. The thought comes up and it's being experienced. Idea comes up, it's being experienced. There is something prior to it experiencing it. Your memory comes up, it's being experienced. None of that is an experiencer. The separate self sucks in all these things, sucks in memory, sucks in ideas, sucks in feelings, sucks in bodily sensations, and then says, that's me. I am conscious and I am separate and I'm experiencing life. But actually that me, everything you've taken yourself to be, is being experienced. Even the you that feels like it's there, looking out from inside this body, is being experienced. Oh, good job, Lisa. I just chucked my tea down myself. Sounding so profound and elegant, and then Missed the mouth. But who cares? Who is it that cares? So there is a character that comes up and might feel embarrassed or amused, but that's not the experiencer. The attachment to that is the suffering. The belief that that is who you are, that you're embarrassed or you're amused. There is nobody that's embarrassed and there's nobody that's amused. There's simply embarrassment or amusement appearing for no one. It's being perceived, but nothing's perceiving it. There is not a thing perceiving it. You could say everything is perceiving it, because by negating the thing, it means that everything is perceiving it. It's not separate from that which is perceived. So the experiencer can never be found. The experiencer is not a thing and everything. It's not separate from everything. Even calling it the experiencer makes you think that you can see it, but you appear in it. You can't look back at it. You are being looked at. You are being experienced. So you begin to see that it's not the person that wakes up. A person can never be liberated. The person is an appearance that belongs to no one. An appearance happening. So I'll just do a bit of an introduction before I take questions. So the more and more that I speak about non-duality, the more that I realise that people are continuously mixing up the personal level or the relative level with the absolute level. And they're trying to fix personal problems with the absolute. I understand now why a lot of gurus, after teaching for so long, give personal advice and stop talking about non-duality and give personal advice, because while you're identified, you don't know the difference. To you, to the identified person, there is no difference between the absolute.
No, that's not going to work. I was just trying to put the ice pack in to keep my computer cool. I still have cooling problems with my computer. There we go. So what happens is you're looking for the answer to, say, an unhappy marriage, or you're unhappy in your relationship. You think that if you surrender to non-duality, if you really hear non-duality, then that will fix itself. And that's true. That is true. So if non-duality is heard, then life will just begin to take care of itself. It might take some time for it to iron out all the kinks, but it will begin to take time, and your daily life will begin to catch up with that realization. So your life will express that realization more and more. It's still going to have its problems, it's still going to be life, you're still going to have arguments and your regular disagreements, but life will begin to catch up. So it will begin to iron out really difficult situations, because the you won't be looking to find freedom in that situation, so therefore it more than likely won't be repeating its negative or attached behavior, its seeking behavior with that person. So say if the problem's in a relationship. But also the lack of action on the human level is also what perpetuates the seeking as well. So if you're in a really unhappy relationship, then that belief, non-duality, will sort it out. Once I realize non-duality, it will sort itself out. Can kind of be an attempt for the person to carry on seeking. It's like its whole life it's grown up, say, being the victim or being abused. And it's like it then uses non-duality to stay in that role of abuse, of being abused. And maybe there'll be a realization that will change. But from my experience, while the seeking energy is really caught up in certain dynamics and in certain habits, there has to be an examination of those habits. And I didn't realise until I started teaching more and more, or there was the updating of this instrument, the learning, this instrument learn, that a lot of people are using the passivity of spirituality in order to stay in victimhood, in order not to act. And it was most probably something that I did, and even after that huge awakening, it was something that was still ironing its way out here, like not using non-duality to be too passive. That's been a habit of mine throughout my life, and so after that awakening, the body still had that habit to do that, to excuse and to forgive people, which is really beautiful to truly forgive someone, but sometimes you need to then say, no, you're not welcome in my life anymore afterwards. Rather than if you keep forgiving people repetitively for certain behaviours, I used to think that they'll change, which could be the case, but from my experience now, if they've been playing out certain behaviours their whole life, from you keep repetitively accepting it, they won't change. That's been their habit the whole life. They pick people that repetitively accept it. So from learning, from after the awakening, seeing this in people and then also seeing it as being a habit in me, I began to realise, even in myself, how I did prior to awakening, how you can use non-duality to stay passive. And it's not going to work. Like prior to my waking up, I was so fortunate to really, really understand my psychology. And I did understand that passive side of this psychology. And through understanding it, a lot of the psychology, there was a breaking of that seeking energy. So through understanding, actually not just the psychology, but the energy of this body, the genetics of this body, the tendency of this body, it broke a lot of the seeking patterns that I was tied up in. And I'm not saying that you're going to get the most perfect conditioned body after awakening. I certainly didn't, and there's still growing and changing and developing and of this my body mind mechanism, and it's still moving to align more and more with that realization. It can always do that. You can always grow on the human level. I don't want to give everyone the impression that arrogance, that there is no change or there is no difference that happens afterwards, can happen with non-duality. If you really hear non-duality, then it's a humility to it all, and there's an acceptance more and more of the instrument in which it's being looked through. And through that acceptance, then there's an open heart to growing and changing and improving, without taking that as saying, I'm not good enough as I am, but just as a natural movement of life. That life is always evolving and growing and growing. And so when I'm speaking about non-duality, I always used to speak about the seeking energy, and how the seeking energy is always trying to get away from what's actually happening and get to the next moment. And so what I'm doing more now with people is pointing it out more directly to people. And the best way I feel that you can understand yourself is by understanding what you're feeling. So by understanding yourself on the body-mind mechanism, understanding what the body-mind mechanism is feeling, because the thoughts, when you're identified, and even when you're not identified, the thoughts aren't interested in truth. So thinking is all about survival and all about fixing problems. So it's not about, thinking isn't interested in reporting back truthful facts. If truthful facts fit in with the movement towards survival, so this body-mind mechanism sees it as beneficial with humans and with community to be as honest as possible. So there's that tendency here. So to want to be as accurate as possible, but you can't ever be fully accurate on events. But the thoughts are interested in you moving towards what you want. So everybody is moving towards what they want. And when they're seeking, that's even more intense. Your thought process is about you staying a person and you getting what you want. So your thought processes might be about how much you hate someone and how much they annoyed you. And this fits in with seeking, because basically what's happening there is you didn't get what you wanted. So they didn't validate who you thought yourself to be, or they went against something of yours. So you're trying to find the best action, the best way to punish them in order to get them to see you in line with what you want them to see you as. So always, even the most, everything is about you getting what you want, thinking wise. And thinking can be about getting on, wanting to get on with people. So it's not all bad, it's beautiful as well. So then there's the thinking about honesty and truth and being honest, because being honest is something that helps us bond together. So but that's the way this mechanism's set up. So thoughts aren't interested in reporting back what you're actually feeling. They're constantly fixated on fixing the problem and getting what you want, what you feel you need. So if you're really stuck in angry mood with someone and you're really angry about something they've done, I really recommend, when you're having a strong feeling, to just understand what's happening in the body mind. So just go into the body, move the attention into the body and feel what's happening. So you've got your story of anger and how much you dislike them, and in your body you might realize you feel afraid and you feel vulnerable. And just register this, and you can just give it some attention, that fear and vulnerability, and just be as honest as you can about that with yourself. And learning about yourself is what will iron out a lot of your seeking patterns. It will make them less complicated. It's not going to stop you wanting or stop you seeking, but it will make it a lot less complicated. You'll come down to a more simple instrument. Most people are just walking around so confused about what they're feeling and thinking. Not when they're feeling pleasure, but when they're feeling pain. So when you're feeling pain, do that. And do that knowing that I'm updating your body-mind mechanism by saying that. So me telling you to do that isn't me telling a separate entity inside that body that it has free will and choice to do that. I'm expressing a description of what can happen. So now I've talked about moving the attention, understanding the body more, and that might happen in your body-mind mechanism, that the thoughts come, Lisa said to feel my feelings more. Just like if I said to put more salt in your dinner, then your body might respond to do that. What we do, in a very complicated way of thinking, is we say, I am moving my attention into my body and it's my responsibility and I'm doing it bad or I'm doing it good. And none of those are true. There isn't actually somebody there. There's a functioning body-mind mechanism that can move the attention or not. But it's not, it's like a robot that's been programmed, just like Google or your phone. It's not a separate entity doing it. So it's a description of something that might happen now, but then again it might not. But I found when I was waking up, or when I was following this subject, I also did this. I was also putting attention in the body, and I was becoming more and more aware of these complicated games I was playing and what was at the root of them. That I either felt lack of love or fear. And through doing that, a lot of my seeking games became less complicated. So say if I was with someone in a conversation that was putting me down, rather than just responding and trying to put them back down in conversations, to someone that's being passive aggressive. So rather than me trying to put them back down or getting really upset, or spending hours in shame or whatever it was, I was just so much more aware of what was happening in the body-mind. So I'd feel the vulnerability, and I'd feel that I wanted to ask them, her or him, to stop. Whereas before, more than likely, I would have just tried to bitch back at them, or I would have let them do it 5 or 6 times and I would have screamed my arse off at them, or whatever it is. But then I became more aware of that. And then I could just say, I feel vulnerable from that comment. It doesn't mean it will work perfectly conversation, because more than likely they're in denial that they've even put you down in the conversation. But on my side, I was just becoming more and more honest. Now, this isn't going to lead you to liberation, because this is the best bit about liberation. And this isn't something that I'm saying that's meant to add to your sense of disempowerment, because I also am aware that a lot of people in our society currently are feeling very disempowered. But this is so beautiful if it can be heard for what it is. there is no you that gets enlightened. You already are enlightened. It's just that you believe you're something that you're not. You believe that you're this person moving in time. But actually, who you are is this alive presence. And it's not the person that wakes up to the alive presence. It's that the person seems to, I don't know, it maybe has less investment in the seeking patterns, or something in the person breaks. Sometimes it can be through tragedy. Sometimes it can be through listening to all of this and having less seeking energy and less complications acting out. And then it just begins to break and the light is seen for what it is. So if we imagine clouds now, so there is the sunlight, and imagine there is this blue sky and there is this sunlight, and then there's clouds, so you can't see that there's sun there, but it's light, so there is the sunlight everywhere, but you can't see the sunlight. So say you've never seen where the light comes from, that it comes from the sun, this yellow ball in the sky, but yet there is light, but you didn't know it was this ball in the sky. And the clouds that are covering the sunlight, say they are the illusory you. And so you believe you're the clouds, and they're so dense and they're thick they never clear, but you believe you're the clouds. And then, so sometimes it's through tragedy, there is a break, or sometimes through just less seeking energy happens, there's less investment, and then it leaks through and there's a gap in the clouds and a sunbeam comes through, and then a bit more and a bit more, and then it begins to be seen that who you truly are is this sunlight, this beautiful sunlight. You are never the clouds, and it's not the clouds seeing it. It's just they begin to part. So the person never wakes up. So the person that's doing that investigation and understanding it's seeking energy and stuff, that's not the person that wakes up. It's just the sunlight reveals itself to us again. It's not hidden anymore. The sun reveals itself. So there's two things that I'm talking about, and don't get them muddled up. So I'm talking about the absolute, which is this sunlight that's here all the time. Who you are is this light, which is presence, which is this, you can call it perception of itself, this knowing of itself, that this is. And that's only ever present and only ever instantaneous, this empty experiencing of itself. And then in that there's this person that's claiming to be somebody. And sometimes the energy can be so strong that you believe that's who you are. And through believing that's who you are, you constantly seek to find that freedom that you remember. And you seek for that in time. And you get totally lost in time. And everything becomes so complicated. You can't understand why you're feeling all these different complicated feelings. So there's two things I'm suggesting. I'm suggesting the person understands itself better, which will create relaxation, which is ultimately good in the human level. Through understanding yourself better and education, then your life becomes less complicated and your life can be more peaceful. That's a beautiful thing. And then I'm also talking about this other part, this non-dual part, where you realize yourself to be something that's always been present and always been here. This free perception that's instantaneous. And don't get those two muddled up. We often believe that it's us waking up. You're not waking up because you never existed. You just seem to have existed. And I know that this can seem really confusing, And I'm sure that all of you listen to multiple teachers, and so it gets very confusing because one says this and one says that. But just in response to that, I just say that there is no truthful teaching, there is no truthful words. The only thing that is true is presence. Is that alive presence that knows itself, which is a sense of being, a sense of existence, and this empty looking. The sense of existence is love, and the empty looking is wisdom, beyond the human wisdom. Compassion. Hey Phyllis, nice that you joined. So don't get too caught up on trying to get all the words right or trying to work out who's right or who's wrong. It doesn't matter. And the person's like, should I be doing this? Should I be doing that? Should I be doing this? And what I would recommend, and the person's feeling really confused, is just a pattern in which it will play out in its job, which will play out in its relationship. And so when that person feels really confused, just see it for what it is and just follow it back into the bodily sensations. And just become aware, there's confusion appearing in the body, and that's creating my thoughts to want to try to find clarity. But you're never going to find clarity, because clarity isn't a word. Clarity is this. The freedom is this. So just be aware of what's going on. You know, the usual. So here's a nice quote. Okay, so now you can ask questions, and know that the goal isn't about you getting your question answered. The goal is that I remind you who you are. That's the goal. That's it. It's so simple. Okay, let's talk about emptiness. I can't guarantee something will come, but we shall try. So we all think this is super real and that we're walking around in a body separate from the world and separate from others, and that it's all super real. And we constantly imagine ourselves as a body that's interacting with this world, that we're a somebody. And we kind of have this imagination and this sensation of who we are. We kind of imagine ourselves inside our head as somebody, and then we kind of have that energetic feeling, and that somebody is made up of lots of different things, whether it be high self-esteem, pride, injustice, all these different qualities are kind of sucked together and made somebody, and it makes it feel like somebody is looking out at this world and somebody is having an experience. But in actuality, there is nothing looking out of these eyes. There is nobody having an experience now. So that sounds like craziness, but maybe in 2017, maybe 15 years after I first heard this message, it's not so shocking to hear that nobody is sitting listening to this talk. Maybe that's a little bit more widely talked about. I remember when I first had it, I was like, huh? How can there be nobody? Look at all these bodies in the room. Of course there's somebody. And I couldn't understand it at all. But it's not talking about the physicality of the body. It's talking about the experiencer. There is nobody experiencing this. It's looking through these machines, these instruments. So you could say there is a body here, but there isn't somebody. There isn't a separate entity experiencing this body. So that's quite intense. There isn't a separate entity experiencing this body. There is nothing experiencing all of this. Not a thing, not a found thing that's experiencing this. And that nothing isn't separate from the everything. That's super cool. You can't even really call it consciousness, although that is the number one quality it needs in order to have an experience is perception. It needs to have the ability to perceive. So you could say the perception is right there with the emptiness and the sense of being. So we've got emptiness, everything, perception and sense of being. They are always, always here and present. That's always here. What changes is form. Form comes and goes. You see? It comes and goes like that. That's my impression, the physical, artistic impression of form coming and going. See, I should be stood in an art gallery all day doing this. And this is the physical interpretation of things coming and going. You see, this is why all those dancers from the Middle East do this with their hands while belly dancing. That's the representation of everything coming and going. That's it, coming and going faster. I'm sorry, I'm hyper tonight. So, what doesn't come and go is this emptiness, this empty perception and the sense of being. That never comes and goes, that's always here. And there's always everything here, but that everything is changing form, so it makes it seem a little bit more confusing. So we've gone really deep, really quick, so I'll just step back. So you sit there and you think you're looking at me. You think that you're experiencing me. But if we took away thinking, if we took away the ability to think, who would be looking? Now, I'm not saying that the self just consists of thinking. It also consists of energies. So it's like when you get angry, you feel an energy in the body. And it's the same with the sense of self. That illusion creates an energy in the body, making it feel like there is a solid self inside here and making it feel like your limitation is here. But it's actually not real, and it's shocking that your actual sense of self, who you truly are, is actually everywhere and not separated from anything. And that fake energy that made it feel like you're bound inside the body isn't real and isn't true at all. So when I was having my awakenings, I mean, I could never at first define what was happening, but it kind of was like everything would go empty and then the border would stop. But then eventually one of the awakenings was so big, it felt like my sense of self went into everything until it disappeared, and then the whole border of inside and outside disappeared. But don't even try to imagine that, because your imagining that will be about seeking for the future. Just let these words go into you and dissolve and not mean anything. all suffering comes from this imagination of self, because this imagination of self is greedy. It's always seeking for pleasure. It perceives pleasure, so it sees the nice sensation of drinking. So it perceives a pleasure, and then it wants to keep repeating that pleasure and avoiding the pain. So it builds up this whole identity that's based around avoiding pain and seeking pleasure. Now obviously the body, so like Khaleesi's body, she's not identified, is going to have that tendency to seek towards pleasure, because that's how we're set up. We seek to go towards the sunlight, we seek towards food, we move towards food. Sorry, not seek. We move towards sunlight, we move towards food. But she doesn't have this separate entity that's watching it and constantly forming a fake entity, trying to always be in a position of pleasure. And that position of pleasure can get so complicated. So it's like the separate self might feel powerless in certain situations, so it builds up this whole identity to not feel powerless in that situation. It might fear going somewhere, so it builds up a whole identity to not experience that fear. And then the attempt to maintain that identity is exhausting, and you can't see it because it's like a programming, an unconscious programming that's gone into the body. And the instrument of the person kind of goes crazy because it can't find rest. And this takes time to build. So as a child, when it begins, it's not that strong. And then it takes time to build. And it's not always in a state of being someone. There's moments where you totally forget yourself. But the person is only aware of itself. And it builds. And it kind of gets more crazy because it gets anxious about having to always maintain its identity. It decides situations that it likes or doesn't like, and it's always trying to avoid them or get to them. It kind of gets itself into this pickle. And then it creates all these thoughts and thinking of worry, anxiety, shame. And it's not necessarily getting rid of feelings, like it can be sadness, there can be embarrassment, there can be shyness, all these things. It's not about getting rid of them. It's this end of this energy that's trying to maintain an identity to always be in pleasure. And it's so unconscious, the game, so unconscious. It's always in a lie. The separate person is always in a state of lying. This is why I hammer on about honesty and truth. It's like you come back so much complete center, and so everything's just spontaneously coming from the divine, and it's not this whole manipulation in order to fulfill a greedy monster. It seeks for pleasure, it moves towards pleasure, the body mind, but it's not like this separate person is so greedy, such rage and hatred if it doesn't get what it wants. How does the sense of being differ from the sense of being a person? It's love. Your essence is love. The sense of being a person is always got the tiniest seed that there's something wrong. Whereas the sense of being is just totally content in itself. It's so empty of all that, or so full, it doesn't need anything. Yet the body moves to do something. And it's nobody's. It's so intimate. The thoughts, the feelings, the actions, the outside world aren't perceived by someone. There's only perception happening. So there's no sort of separation from them or distance from them. But Julia, it's so hard to talk about. It's like, yeah. Like trying to get that in words is really complicated. Oh. While walking by a river a couple of months ago, the emptiness was seen. Once the emptiness was seen, this became apparent at last. Wonderful. So emptiness is a great topic here. Rock on. Yeah. And I kind of forget that it's not seen. So, I don't give these things that much attention because I always am talking, assuming that you guys know what I mean, even though I'm not even assuming you know what I mean. I suppose it's just I project you on me, so therefore I must probably speak at a really not complicated level, but yeah. I just feel like I say it and then everybody knows. So I don't give things that much attention, like different subjects. But it's the most best favourite subject. It was always emptiness that I was attracted to. Cool.
So non-duality isn't about taking on new concepts. It isn't about having a new perspective on life and looking at life through a new filter of non-duality. It's about the end of filters or the end of perspectives or positions about anything. So non-duality, in a dramatic way, you could say, is the loss of everything you think you know, including you. It's really not about walking around with a new religion, with a new idea of yourself and what you believe in. So it's not about anything I say or any other non-duality speaker says. So if you believe non-duality is about no self or no doer or no separation, then that's just what you believe and not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about as an energetic drop of inside and outside. And it's the end of suffering. It's the end of resistance to what is. It's the end of somebody resisting what is. But to believe what I say is just to be in another religion, another dogma. It's not about believing what I say. So what is it about? It's about what always is. It's got nothing to do with concepts. Yeah, concepts appear in it and are it, but not because of what they mean, but because of the experience of them, or the appearance of them. So it's about this freedom that is, this stillness that is, this no-thingness, this everythingness, this
So when a lot of body-mind mechanisms hear that, what they do is they then imagine themselves being in this and knowing this and understanding this and one day dissolving into this. And that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about this. The sound of the clock ticking, the sound of the voice, the light, the sensations, the thinking, the feeling.